Hello, everyone. Make sure that everyone makes it into the webinar. Chat is here. Hello, Kamal.
Hi, David. How are you?
Good. How are you? Glad to see you. Made it in, and thank you for being here. I have a few announcements. I'll go ahead and get started.
Sure.
Welcome, everyone. My name is David Corsar, and I manage career development programs here at the National Wildlife Federation, including this year's EcoCareers Summit Series, along with support from the higher education team and the entire education and engagement department. Before I begin, can I check on the captions? Are they coming through? Yep, looks like they are. So if you would like to turn captions on, there's a menu at the bottom that says captions with the ellipsis. So if you click captions, and you can make sure that it's turned on. All right. I'm joining the conference from the National Wildlife Federation's Washington, D.C. office, which we acknowledge is located on the lands of the Natchitoches or Anacostans and neighbors the lands of the Piscataway and Pamunkey peoples. The village of Natchitoches was the largest of the 3 thriving indigenous villages located in the Washington area and is believed to have been a major trading center for the entire Chesapeake Bay region. However, after just 4 decades of contact with European colonialists, through disease, encroachment, and violence, the indigenous population of this region were reduced to only a quarter of the original numbers. Those who survived were forced further inland or merged with larger tribes. According to officials at the National Museum of the American Indian, there is no living Natchitoches lineage left, as survivors were adopted into the Piscataway people, where their distinct identity and descendancy were lost. I think it is important, when acknowledging the land and history of Native Americans, to also acknowledge that Native Americans are not confined to history, nor defined by the impacts of colonialism. I recommend you all to also learn more about the present-day cultures, conflicts, and achievements of the people on whose land we in the U.S. reside. The Piscataway people are alive and well. Like others, many have moved to different locations, but the heaviest concentration is in nearby Charles, Prince George's, and St. Mary's counties in Maryland. Here, the Piscataway Kainai tribe has been a major force in convincing the Washington football team to finally change their name. And recently, the tribe successfully petitioned local and state representatives to change the name of a major highway from Indian Head Highway, long considered offensive by the tribe, to Piscataway Highway. Also, just last month, they announced that for the first time in 400 years, they have acquired land officially for tribe use. And I'm going to go ahead and put into the chat a few links. One is a successful change.org petition update about the highway name, and then the other is a Facebook post about the land purchase. And again, I invite all of you to learn more about the issues facing tribes that are local to you and how you can be an ally and provide some more support. Go ahead and pop this into the chat. Oh, I think there are a couple of people stuck in backstage, so let me go ahead and move them. There we go. I have a couple of quick announcements before we get things started. Again, welcome to this year's EcoCareers Summit Series. I'd like to thank my team, my higher education team of Courtney Cochran and Christy Jones, who I just got into the webinar. Y'all were stuck in backstage. I apologize for that. And we also want to thank our sponsors this year. This year, our corporate sponsor is GM. We have a session on sustainable transportation later this week, as well as our college and university sponsors, College of the Holy Cross, Raritan Valley Community College, Rowan University, Towson University, and University of Colorado Boulder. Thank you all for your support. This week, as you know, today we have our kicking off things with a keynote session with Dr. Kamal Kapadia. And then tomorrow, we hope you'll be back to join for our first career panel hosted by the Climate Equity Collaborative, followed by a workshop on careers in environmental justice. On Wednesday, we have our panel at 4 p.m. Eastern, notice the time shift, on sustainable transportation careers. Again, that'll be followed by a workshop on preparing for careers in sustainable transportation. And on Thursday, we have our artist spotlight for this year's event, Irving Kano, who is an artist and muralist. And that session will be conducted in Spanish, and we will have English interpretation throughout the entire session. So we hope you come back each day this week for EcoCareers 2023. Go ahead and go back to my script. So today, I would like to thank the hundreds of students, faculty, and professionals joining us from high schools, colleges, universities, and organizations across the country, all coming together to learn about rewarding sustainability careers. We hope that you keep in mind 3 things during these sessions. With the technology, please bear with us during any glitches. There's bound to be a few. If you encounter an issue, please first try either refreshing the tab that you're on, if you're on a browser, or closing and opening Zoom if you're joining through the app. Please take advantage of the chance to interact in the chat box and in the Q&A box. The chat box is used to talk to us and to each other throughout the entire summit series. We really do encourage you to add your expertise and ideas to the conversation here. And use the Q&A box to send questions to our moderators, which will be asked to the keynote speakers and panelists at the tail end of their sessions. And third, NWF support. NWF is here to support you as you develop your leadership and career skills at each life stage, from pre-K through high school to entering the workforce to further academic goals and beyond. And we hope you will explore and take advantage of those programs. So to kick things off, I'd like to introduce our week 1 keynote speaker, Dr. Kamal Kapadia, course creator and co-founder of Terra.do. Dr. Kamal Kapadia has 25 years of work researching and teaching experience in the fields of climate change, clean energy, and sustainable development. She started her career in the late 1990s working for solar photovoltaic startup Selco in India and Sri Lanka, and Solar Century, now Statkraft, in the UK. She has consulted on clean energy planning with the World Bank and also managed research and communications for Blue Planet Foundation in Hawaii, the organization that successfully lobbied for the US's first state-level 100% renewable energy law. Kamal was also a research fellow at the Environmental Change Institute at the University of Oxford, where she taught extensively on the master's program in environmental change and management. She holds a Master of Science in Environmental Change and Management from the University of Oxford and a PhD in Energy and Resources from the University of California, Berkeley. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to you, Kamal.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I'm going to share my screen, and I thought since we're a nice small group, maybe we can be pretty informal with the Q&A. So I unfortunately can't see you. I can only see the faces of the panelists, but if anybody has a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can just raise hand, and I'm happy to stop the presentation, take your questions during the presentation. We don't have to be too formal. I'm pretty good at monitoring the chat as well. So yeah, just feel free to pause me anytime, and we'll take it from there. So I'm going to share my screen. And just wanted to check if everybody can see the slideshow. Just give me a thumbs up if you can.
Looks good.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, thank you. Sorry, one second. Let me get back to the slideshow. I need to, I just need to get to my part of it. Here we go. Okay. So yeah, thank you again for having me. I'm Kamal Kapadia. I'm one of the founders of Terra.do. And in this keynote, I want to talk about meaningful climate action, what it looks like, and how you can achieve it. And what I'm going to start with is just a personal story about how I got started in this work. So as David mentioned, I started my career working for solar startups. And one of the companies was Celco, the solar electric light company. And what we did at Celco, this was literally my first job after my master's degree. And what we did at Celco was we did rural electrification in India, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam with solar PV for communities that lacked access to the electric grid. And this is just a picture of me and a solar panel that I myself installed, much to the horror of the poor family that lived in that household, because actually I had colleagues who were better at me at doing this work, but I was just trying to get the experience. And I start with this story because at the time, I was very critical of government, and I didn't think government had much of a role to play, especially because the problem that we were dealing with from the company's perspective was lack of electricity. And at that time, there were 2 billion people in the world who lacked access to grid electricity. It's still a high number, like over 1 billion. And so it felt like there was a failure of government, and somehow I, in my 20s, was going to solve this problem with the power of the private sector. Now, of course, as we did this work, I began to see the limits of what the private sector could achieve on its own, and started to question how far we can get with just this work. And so, of course, I went off to graduate school, and I actually shifted entirely to the other side. And I got very interested in government and government policy and how far we can push on environmental action if we really just got the right policies in place. And so these are a couple of projects I worked on when I was in graduate school. On the left, I was part of a team, and we were actually commissioned by the John Kerry presidential campaign. If anyone here is old enough to remember, he ran for president against George Bush Jr. second time. And he wanted some numbers on how many jobs can be generated through the renewable energy industry. And so I was involved in that study. And then on the right is a picture of the work I did in Hawaii. That's me over there. This is us with the governor and a few more recent successful policies that we managed to pass. But of course, as I was doing this work, I ran up against what felt like kind of the challenges and limits of government policy and government action. And of course, through all this 25 years of work, one big takeaway for me, and which is actually in some ways the founding story and why I ended up starting Terra with my co-founders, was I realized that actually we just need everybody working on this problem. We need the private sector, we need the government, we just need everybody really working on this problem. We're not going to solve climate change if we just rely on government. We're not going to definitely solve it if we just rely on the private sector. We need community, we need activists, we need educators, we need everybody working on this problem. And that's why we started Terra.do. We are the largest platform for upskilling talent into the green economy. And I'll come back to that in a minute, what that means, and later in this talk as well. And our mission, we have this very ambitious mission, which is to get 100 million people working directly on solving climate change by 2030. And we do this in 3 ways. We do a bunch of training programs. We run a climate boot camp. We have this awesome climate farm school program that's a hybrid program. You spend some time on a regenerative farm, the rest of it is online. And we've also worked directly with employers and large organizations to train up their employees to work together to solve this problem. We also do a lot of stuff on careers. So we have a climate jobs board. We run these climate jobs fairs. And we have a huge community now working in all kinds of organizations, big and small, around the world. And all of this comes together in our app, Learning Jobs Community. It's free. You can download the app. Feel free to check us out. So that was just a little personal introduction, an introduction of Terra. And now I'm going to jump into the main substance of this talk, which is meaningful climate action. And sorry, I realized as I'm speaking, I can't, oh yeah, I see the chat there. It is, just wanted to see, oh, thank you for sharing that link. Yeah, and if I miss something in the chat, just feel free to even like unmute yourself and interrupt. It's totally fine, but I'll try to monitor the chat as well. So I see meaningful climate action. I find it useful to think about it through 2 big frameworks: truth and courageous action. And so we're going to kind of drill into both of these and think a little bit more about what they each mean. But they're both part of this thing called meaningful climate action. So let's start with this side, which is the truth. And before we get into this, and much of this is going to be familiar to you, this truth side of it. So I'm going to cover that fairly quickly. Before we do this though, I want to do a quick check-in. I want to do a check-in and see how folks are feeling. And there's a purpose to this. So just bear with me. I will talk about the purpose of this later in this talk. But for now, let's just do a quick check-in on a scale of 1 to 5, and you can use the chat to tell me how you're feeling. Do you feel like the relaxed kitten, or do you feel like the anxious hamster? So 1 being very relaxed, 5 being very anxious. And sometimes in order to really check into how you're feeling, it's helpful to take a deep breath, close your eyes, and just check in your body. We hold stress in all kinds of places. We hold it between our eyebrows, in our necks and shoulders. Are your shoulders all tense? In your chest and stomach, like your stomach tight. So just check in and see how you're feeling. And if you feel like you want to share, feel free to just put a number in the chat. So today a 5, yeah. Anybody else feels like sharing, please put it in the chat. Totally fine if you don't as well. Just a way of seeing what the general feeling is in the room. 3, yeah, we got a 3. All right. Okay, well, folks, if you feel like sharing as I continue, please feel free to put your numbers in the chat. So we're going to dive into some heavy stuff now. Again, some of this you're familiar with. Hopefully, most of it. Climate change is real and we are the cause. So this is the first truth that we have to face. And now I'm going to talk you through some nerdy graphs because some of these help illustrate this point. And so this, of course, the reason we have climate change is because the concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are increasing. I find this graph quite useful for putting this in the very long context. So this graph is taken from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It goes back 800,000 years. So thanks to ice core data, we are able to actually look at what carbon dioxide. So the x-axis is time, going back 800,000 years. The y-axis is concentrations of carbon dioxide, which is our chief greenhouse gas of concern in the atmosphere. This green and black section here is basically since the Industrial Revolution started. So I find this really puts it into context. We are in uncharted territory when it comes to these concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And of course, the reason we care about this is because greenhouse gases trap heat close to the Earth, and that is driving up global average temperatures. This is a nice visual. It doesn't go back as far, it's just the last 20 years, but every single line is just shows how far we are the global average temperature in that year is deviated from an average for the period 1901 to 2000. So they've drawn this average line and then they're just showing how we're deviating from this average. And of course, right now we're about 1.1 degrees Celsius, 1.1 degrees Celsius above average. And you can just see, so we are increasing concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. This is driving up global average temperatures. And of course, we know that we are the cause of this. The chief cause is burning fossil fuels. The other cause is land use change. And these two together are fueling global emissions. And this is contributing to increasing concentrations and therefore driving up temperatures. So climate change is real and we are the cause. The second important truth is it is here and now. Again, just another graphic which captures the same story. This is produced by the Met Office Hadley Center in the UK. And what they've done is every single circle here represents a year and every little segment of the circle is a month. And they are just looking at how the average temperature for that month is deviating from the average for the period 1850 to 1900. And you can see over time, the colors just tell the whole story here that we are continuously warming the planet. July 2021 was actually the warmest July on record. And you can see, especially in the last decade, what's been going on. And of course, so this is just another sort of little indicator that folks are tracking. This is a very recent graphic that I just got off Twitter actually last week. This is sea surface temperatures And so what is this graph showing us? It's every single one of these lines just shows what's happening to sea surface temperature in a given year. And so this orange line is actually 2022. And this black line is this year. This black line, and this right here is just from a few days ago, so April 7th. So we are in completely uncharted territory when it comes to the sea surface temperatures globally. Completely uncharted territory here. And of course, this all translates to real impacts. The graph on the top left is just a graphic that captures weather-related disasters, losses from weather-related disasters just in the US. These are going up. And there are so many thousands of human stories behind these numbers. This story from the right from February hones in on this entire neighborhood in Houston that still has not been able to recover after Hurricane Harvey. So again, and this is another study just kind of capturing another dimension of the impacts, and one that will be close to your hearts as well. And actually one that I wasn't even aware of or thinking about until I came across this study, that climate change actually causes ocean deoxygenation, partly because warmer water doesn't hold as much oxygen, and it also relates to how the mixing happens between upper layers and lower layers of the ocean. And for the first time, they've actually documented the effect of this on reefs. And yeah, as you can imagine, it's not very good. And so climate change is real, it's here and now, the impacts are real. And all the scientists are telling us that we should not exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius of average global warming. We should not exceed this. Now, keep in mind, this is not some absolute number. Every single degree of warming matters. Every little fraction of a degree matters. But generally, there's a general consensus that, especially after 1.5 C of warming, we are in some dangerous territory. And right now, remember, we're at 1.1 C of warming. And so I promise you this is the last nerdy graph, and then we'll be going to move on to other things. But I really want to spend a few minutes on this graph, because we're not supposed to exceed 1.5 C of warming, but we are headed to much warmer temperatures. And so let me just spend a minute on this graph, just breaking it down for you. It's produced by this organization, Climate Action Tracker. And what they do is they take all different countries' pledges, policies, actions, promises, and they translate that into what it means for global greenhouse gas emissions and temperatures. And so let me just break this graph down for you and draw your attention to a few things in this graph. So on the x-axis is just years. On the y-axis is global greenhouse gas emissions. Don't worry about the unit. It's just a measure of global greenhouse gas emissions over time. And this black line is the historical emissions. And there's a little downturn here. Does anyone want to guess what that is? Anyone want to put in the chat, like, why did emissions go down? Like this tiny little dent here. Anyone knows? Any guesses? COVID, exactly. Yes, there you go. That was COVID. But you can see it was pretty small. We've bounced right back up. And everything that's in color is a projection of where we're headed. So this blue set, this whole big blue area here, that is where we are currently headed if you add up all the policies and actions around the world. So if you take all the policies and actions, we're somewhere between like 2.5 to 3 degrees Celsius. We're headed to 2.5 to 3 degrees of Celsius warming by 2100. Now, the other thing to draw your attention to is this light blue line that says pledges and targets. And you might wonder, what is pledges and targets versus policies and actions? So the reality is, even though every single country has, well, most countries now have some kind of commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, virtually every single one is not on track to meeting its own targets and goals. And that's why this is a much more realistic assessment of where we're headed if you look at what we're actually doing. And this is an optimistic assessment of where we could be if we just met all the pledges and targets we have currently set around the world. And there's an optimistic version of this too. Of course, the line we need to be on, the rate at which we need to be reducing our emissions is this green line. So we need to actually go down to zero emissions and then start taking carbon dioxide out of the air. And that is the 1.5C compatible trajectory. So that's where we need to be. And this is the trajectory that we're currently on. So on that note, oh, of course, sorry, this is one last point before I complete this section. You know, I like to always bring it back to impacts that we care about. So earlier I had talked about impacts we're already seeing. One impact that we are beginning to see and we're likely to see a lot more of that doesn't get enough attention is climate migration. There is this amazing series of stories, investigative journalism stories, co-produced by ProPublica and the New York Times. I recommend you check it out. It's called The Great Climate Migration. And they talk about how climate change is starting to drive and will drive just unprecedented movements of people around the world, because as conditions get intolerable, people don't just like lie down and die, they pick up and move. And we are beginning to see that. In the story, they say that right now, 1% of land is an unlivable hot zone. And by 2070, even on sort of moderate emission pathways, we could see up to 19% of land being an unlivable hot zone. So yeah, so on that note, how are people feeling? Any change in your emotional state? Feel free to put it in the chat. Also fine not to share. We will move on to part 2 of the truth, which will hopefully make you feel a little better. And this is, of course, the whole world of solutions. So there's a lot going on in climate action, but it's very important to, again, sorry, I said there were no more nerdy graphs. This is a graph. You don't have to look at the graph as much as just the basic message, which is that to solve climate change, there is no substitute for rapid emissions reduction. So we have to get to zero or net zero emissions to stop global warming. Every single additional molecule of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is creating warming. And so even if we reduce the rate at which we're putting it in the atmosphere, we might slow it down, but we will still keep warming the earth until we get to zero or net zero emissions. And by net zero, which means stop emitting like 90%, which means basically eliminate all fossil fuels and then remove the rest. So this is just important context, because sometimes people feel like we can remove or sequester our way out of this problem, and that is just simply not the case. We do need removal. We need to remove carbon from the atmosphere because we waited and delayed action for so long, but that is additional to stopping burning fossil fuels. So the good news is, of course, is that we already have the solutions. We have all the solutions, and many of them are extremely economical. You might be familiar with Project Drawdown. They have a great, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on this. I'm just going to point you to this resource. They have broken down all the climate solutions by sector. You can browse this yourself. We have so many solutions and so many people working on these solutions. The only thing is we need to ramp up everything. We need to be doing a lot more of all these solutions. We need to be ramping it up. And so this is just a table from the World Resources Institute. And they have tried to quantify the gap, the global gap in climate action. And they just kind of have broken down all of these different levers we have for solving climate change. And they kind of try to quantify by how much we have to ramp up. So how much faster we need to go. So for example, this one, share of zero carbon sources in electricity generation, which is just how fast we're putting clean energy on the grid. We need to be going 6 times faster, and so on and so forth. So we have the solutions. We need to be just doing more of them. And one thing I don't have in this presentation, even though I have a whole other presentation on this, is we have to do this while paying very careful attention to justice. Justice has to be at the core of how we do this work. So that's just something to call out. We talked about some of the truths. Climate change is real, we're causing it, it's here and now, and we have solutions. and we need to ramp them up, and we need to pay attention to justice. Now we're going to dig into this right-hand side part of the screen, courageous action. And I just want to check the chat to see that I haven't missed anything here. Oh yeah, we got a 2 earlier. This came in from a hike. Cool. Yeah. That's how I feel like a 1 or a 2 if I go on a hike, no matter how stressed I am. So I can totally relate. All right, so now let's focus on the courageous action and drill down into what that really means. So the one thing we really believe at Terra is every job is a climate job. This, I really and truly believe this. And you know, people often ask me, how can I as an individual make a difference? And if you think about the world of answers that are typically given to this question, there's 2 answers that sort of are usually given to this question. And one answer is you can directly work on this as a consumer, or you can directly work on this as a citizen. So the consumer part of it is very much you can change your purchasing habits, you can be a much more conscious shopper. If you have money and you own a home, you can put solar on your roof, you can buy an EV, etc. The citizen part of it is getting much more involved in advocacy and pushing for the right people in power and pushing and you know, like really pushing the people in power to do the right thing. So really kind of utilizing all the resources you have as a citizen to influence change. But there is a third route. There is a third route, and that is through your career. Through your career, you can directly act on this problem. And if you stop and think about it, think of how many hours and days and years of your life you will devote to your career. So this is an incredible resource. This is your passion, your mental energy, your time, your everything. You put so much into a job, and this is a huge space for influencing this problem and being part of the solution. And we really truly believe that every job is a climate job. We need the educators, we need the marketing professionals, we need the product managers, we need the software engineers, we need the business executives, we need the activists, we need everybody working on this. Every job can be a climate job. And you know, one of the reasons we think that is because literally climate change and climate action is already changing everything in the economy at a very big scale. So this is just a graph of like huge big sectors of the economy, global economy, and how much of that sector, how much of the global economy is represented by that sector. And these are just some examples of sources of disruption that are, you know, currently taking place in these sectors. And so these changes are taking place now. There are massive, massive shifts in the global economy that are already occurring. And all of this is actually translating into jobs and a skyrocketing demand for green skills. So this is actually a report produced by LinkedIn. They produce a big report on green skills by looking across all the jobs and the changing patterns of jobs on their job site. And they have sort of looked at all these different green skills that are in demand, everything from skills in pollution prevention to environmental auditing, environmental finance, all kinds of jobs. There is a skyrocketing demand for green skills, and there is actually a shortage of talent. So this report itself says that there is a ever-growing shortage of talent to meet this growing demand. And this is why we came into existence. We saw this need, and we are trying to address this problem. We're trying to give people a quick on-ramp into this work. Maybe some of you have undergraduate and master's degrees that are already relevant, but there's many, many people out there who don't have these skills, who don't have the time or resources to get a master's degree. And so we are working with them to figure out, and we're helping them transition into this sector by providing them training, jobs, community. Let's dig in a little bit more in how we do this. How do you do this work of transitioning an entire economy and getting people into this space. So at Terra, having worked with like thousands of professionals, we have come to see that there are 3 pillars for sustainability transformation, 3 pillars. And most people just focus on the one that's at the top of this little triangle, but it is not enough. So the top of the triangle is knowledge acquisition and skills development. And this is kind of the obvious one. For an individual to be inspired to action, they need to understand what needs to be done and how to do it. So you need some skills to do this work. But that is not enough. You also need emotional resilience. And when I did those little check-ins, that was just like a tiny taster of a lot of this kind of work we do, much deeper work we do in our training programs, which is to build emotional resilience. And there's 2 reasons why we see emotional resilience as so important. So for people who are outside of climate, as they learn more about the problem, they get very anxious as they actually face up to the science of it. They get very anxious. But the other thing is that this is hard work. Okay, this is hard work. And if you're going to stay in it for the long haul, you need some tools, and you need to just build your capacity to hold it emotionally, to hold all the grief around what we are losing and all the fear and all the anxiety, and to still do this work and to turn up with love and enthusiasm and a willingness to do this work. So emotional resilience is another very important part of the work. And the last thing, of course, is community, because it is very, very hard to do this work alone. If you are a single person in an organization that is not paying attention to the problem, doesn't think they have a role to play, and you want to influence your organization, it is probably very hard to do it alone. And it is much easier if you have a community, even a small community that you can work with to do this work inside your organization. And this is true everywhere. You need community to be effective. But even this is not enough. Even these 3 are not enough, because there's one more piece that is essential. And remember how I said I'm not going to show you any graphs anymore? Well, I lied. I'm coming back to this graph, but you've seen it before. The last time I showed you this graph, I left out something. And I left out the fact that even, say, 7 or 10 years ago, the trajectory that we thought we were on was this one. So even if you go back 10 years and you look at all the IPCC reports, the scientific reports, and you look at what all the scientists were saying, we thought we were headed for catastrophic climate change. Okay, every single projection had us going to 4 degrees of average warming. Those were the emission trajectories everyone thought we were headed on. And over the last 10 years, we have bent that curve. So no scientific report anymore sees this as a likely outcome. This is kind of the most likely pathway. And so we have already bent this curve quite significantly. And the way we have bent this curve is because people have been courageous. People everywhere, in government organizations, inside the private sector, in community, in activist groups, in schools, in colleges, everywhere, nonprofits, people have been courageous. They have pushed themselves, they have pushed their organizations, they have pushed their leaders. They have done unpopular things, and they have helped us bend this curve. And so, of course, what we need is a whole lot more courage. Okay, we all need to be courageous. Even if we're already in this space, we need to be courageous. We need to be pushing more. We need to get out of our comfort zone. Anyway, so this is basically the end of my talk. I want to do one last check-in if anyone wants to share how they're feeling. Hopefully, if I scared you earlier, you are feeling a little bit more enthusiastic now. And yeah, so this is a little prompt that I like to leave people with, just something to think about. And actually, this is the first assignment we put people in. We throw all the professionals who come into our learning programs, we always start them off with this assignment, which is a visioning exercise. And it goes something like this. The year is 2045, and we have solved climate change. We have done it, folks. We have solved it. And you are one of the many heroes of this transition, and your story was inspiring. And now you've been invited back to share this story. What is one courageous act that will be part of your story? To go beyond your comfort zone, face some difficult truths. This is not something you've done before, but something you will do, and use your imagination. What is your courageous act that will help us solve this challenge? So thanks very much. I'm going to stop sharing and see if folks have any questions.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic presentation. I was as I mentioned, I was a 5 going in. I stayed at a 5 for a bit, but I really like that you emphasized that the progress that has already been made and the courage that it took to get us to where we are today. A lot more courage needed, but definitely brought me down to a 4.25. Still more of a hamster than a kitten, but I have a couple questions. So you mentioned that so many different, so we agree at the National Wildlife Federation that every job is a conservation job, every job is a climate job. The immensity of the climate and biodiversity crises, which are interlinked, really do take economy-wide approaches, and every sector can be activated, every level of every sector can be activated. And so I'm curious, because there are one of the messages that we hear from the students that we work with, particularly in high school, is when first you kind of go through that anxiety phase and then you go into the learning more about solutions. Drawdown is a really fantastic resource for exploring the different solutions, as you mentioned, the technology that we already have. How would you advise someone who sees that level of opportunity and feels as though kind of stuck in making the decision of how do I make a decision of which of those drawdown solutions do I commit myself to?
So this is a really great question. I think, and we actually, so it's not just relevant for high schoolers. We get this question from professionals who already have skills, okay, all the time. So this is basically the fundamental question. And I'd say there's a few things, and some of it is, I would say, I feel that schools need to be doing better. But one thing that is extremely important when you're in high school is actually to just have role models and sort of see and like meet people who are doing this work. Because when I think about how I got started, okay, like how did I become an environmentalist? I was in India, okay, I was in this, it's funny because in India we call it a mid-sized town, but it has like 6 million people, so it's a large city. I grew up in this like mid-sized town, and in high school I was very interested in environmental stuff, and I didn't have like any immediate access. Like it wasn't a thing. It wasn't a big thing back then. Like nobody in my school was interested in it, and I wanted to do something, and I didn't know what it was. But my mother had a friend, and she was very interested in waste management, and she was trying to get folks in like these residential buildings to start separating their waste and to do, compost the wet waste and recycle the dry. And this seemed like a no-brainer, and now we're doing it in like so many places. But like 25 years ago or 30 years ago, this was a new idea, especially in Indian cities. And so I just started like tagging along with her. So this auntie, right? I just started tagging along with this auntie. And to some extent, she was like a role model for me, because she was somebody in my community who was doing the work. And she was showing me how this work was done. So I think it's very, very important to have role models. And like in some ways, schools are like failing the kids by not exposing them. So for a short time, I taught at a private school in Hawaii. I actually taught at a charter school as well, but I taught at this private school. And it was this very like ambitious school. Like the kids were super ambitious, and they would have the school would organize these careers fairs, and they would do like doctors and law, they would do one for like medical, and they would do one for business, but they never had one for like sustainability. And so I thought, well, like kids, like students, don't even know about this huge range of jobs. They don't know that Google hires for this skill. They want sustainability skills. You know, Microsoft is hiring for sustainability skills. Banks are hiring for sustainability skills. If you are a software engineer, you can work on climate. If you are a hardware engineer, you can work on climate. If you are a teacher, if you are an English teacher, you can teach about climate. I have a friend, she's a professor at the University of Hawaii. She teaches English and she teaches it entirely through the lens of climate change. All her courses are about climate change. She's an English professor who teaches about climate. So this can be integrated into any job. So to some extent, I would say the advice to students is, it's not that different from any career advice. It is like, you know, what are you good at? What do you enjoy doing? Because, hey, guess what? There is probably a climate or conservation job for you. Just, you will have to do that extra bit of work to make these connections, this extra bit of work. And so sometimes it's about just finding the right teacher, a teacher who can guide you. Sometimes it's about finding somebody in your community who can just open some doors, who can show you these opportunities. Hopefully everybody now knows at least one or two people who are doing this work. Just tag along, like see if you can tag along. Can you join them in their workplace for a day? Can you see what this work experience is like? And let me say, so, you know, I wouldn't worry about like figuring it out in high school, in the sense that if you plan to go to college, do what you are interested in, but do the work to find that connection to sustainability. Because I promise you, there is a job for every skill set in sustainability. And we actually need all these skills. You know, sustainability skills aren't just its own thing. You should see, so one of the sectors that we work with at Terra is this sector that we call climate tech. So these are small and medium companies that are growing extremely fast. I mean, they are, and you know, they are hiring like hundreds upon hundreds of software engineers, but they're also hiring marketing professionals, and they're hiring salespeople, and they're hiring project managers, and they are hiring communicators, and they are hiring management professionals. So they're hiring for all the standard business roles that kind of are out there. And these are all climate jobs now. And so, yeah, I don't know if like that's, you know, the best advice, but that's how I think about it. And I do think schools need to be doing more. Like schools really do need to be doing more. Often teachers are going out of their way. Like teachers are trying, we get teachers turning up in our program all the time in order to do this work in their classroom. And so individual teachers are going above and beyond, but it hasn't really gotten integrated into the school curriculum in a sort of very integrated way. You know, maybe it turns up in science class. I think this is one of the failings, that climate often turns up, or conservation will only turn up in science. And so kids who don't feel drawn to science feel like, oh, I don't see a pathway for me. And this is absolutely not true. You don't need to just pursue science in order to do this work, because we need every single skill set and we need all your talents. We especially need communicators and educators. We need activists, we need advocates, we need people who are good with finance and numbers, accountants. Greenhouse gas accounting is going to be a big job. Like it's going to be this big job everyone's going to hire for greenhouse gas accounting. So if you are into accounting, you can do that. And by the way, if you are into the trades, this is your time. Oh my God. Yeah, that is a job that the AI isn't going to take away. That is a job that is not going to get outsourced to another country. We are so short of skilled tradespeople. You know, one of the, if you look at this big government policy that, so the US passed this massive big climate law called the IRA. Okay, they cleverly named it the Inflation Reduction Act. But it's actually this massive big climate law. And one of the, if you dig into it and like look into all the details, one of the things they have identified as a major area for like investment and upskilling are contractors. Because one of the things we need to do one of the ways in which we're going to get everybody to clean energy is actually we have to get rid of all the fossil fuels. So you can no longer have gas heating your house. All the stuff that's run on gas needs to run on clean energy. And so there's this whole big movement called electrification of buildings, We need to get everybody off the gas supply, and we need to, everything needs to just run on electricity, because then we can run the grid on clean electricity, and it's all clean. And so we got to get folks, so no gas stoves, no gas heating. I have a gas stove, I have gas heating in my house. Now, who's going to do this work? It's going to be the contractors. Like, they are going to come in and shift every single house, every single building. So that's a big trades job. That's a climate job. Solar installers, wind technicians, like, these are the fastest growing jobs in the US right now. So you really don't need to be into like, you don't have to you can go to trade school, and I'll promise you will have a job if you pursue one of these lines of work, because there is such a huge demand and a massive shortage.
Yeah, and one of the really fantastic thing about the trades is that there are a lot of apprenticeship programs and a lot of on-ramps into the trades. And so if that is something, if you enjoy working with your hands, if it is something that appeals to you, there are really great ways to get into those careers, because they are also experiencing bottlenecks of meeting more folks. And I kind of want to go back to that point you made about talent bottlenecks. And I'm curious, where would you go to find the maybe top skills, or the skills that are really in demand that aren't being met on the part of recruiters and hiring managers?
So, by the way, this is a great question, and the truthful answer is, like, it doesn't really live. There's like nowhere where this is sort of really done. And in fact, I try to even use like Chat GPT and like the new Microsoft tool to see, like, am I missing something? To see is it out there? And it turns out it isn't really out there. But there are these like sources of statistics. So you can go to like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it shows like different. But it's like not a very user-friendly website. Like, you kind of have to like go through their website and find like the top 20 growth, like employment growth areas. And so there are these like places that are kind of collecting the statistics, but they're often not even using the right categories. So for example, there might now be like a lot of jobs in, say, like say finance even. There might be a bunch of jobs, or in the insurance industry, there might be jobs, and they won't get categorized as like, say, a climate job. So this idea of a climate job or a sustainability job, it's a loose idea. It's across so many skills. And so, I mean, the other way to think about it is you can be subversive and like take a non-climate job in a organization and then make it your mission to transform that organization. We've seen this, we've had a lot of people doing some pretty amazing things like inside their companies, like just getting together with their colleagues and like really pushing on the leadership to implement some policies and goals and changes. And so if you have an activist bent, that's one way of doing it. The other, I'll stop there.
And you mentioned earlier about the finding role models who are doing this work, and you mentioned your aunt and the influence that she had on you. Have you had any professional mentors that have really helped you kind of connect the dots with your career path? It's a concept that we want young people starting at the beginning of their professional career to be on the lookout for those people who take an interest in your career and helping you develop your career. And when you get to the point where you're able to pass that on to be a mentor as well. Have you had professional mentors?
Yeah. So yes, I'll say yes, but also, this is exactly what we also do in Terra. So by the way, even if you're a professional, you need mentors. And so what we've built, we've wrapped these mentorship programs around all of our training opportunities, because, for example, if somebody wants I have these conversations with professionals, and like one person will tell me, I've had these conversations. One person is like, I've had 15 years of experience in the insurance industry in Hong Kong, and now I want to shift my career. And the truth is, like, what do I know about how to shift? But there is probably a mentor in our community who can guide this person because they're from that geography. they've actually gone through this transition themselves. They've had to think about it. It may not be the same transition, but it's a little bit closer to what they are interested in, and it's more relevant to where they are. And so mentorship, I think, is absolutely key. So this is a really a useful thing you've called out. And I certainly have had like a lot of professional mentors. Like that job at Selco, where I started my career, the founder of that company, I mean, he's this amazing guy in India. I found him to be like really inspirational. He was really like just a person of great integrity and really a man of the people. Like, for example, for the first 6 months, we didn't even have a head office because we were like, well, our work is in the villages, so why do we need a head office? Like, we need to be out. And so he taught me some like important skills that I feel like I still carry to today. He was really helpful. And, for example, then after I had worked there for 3 years, that's when I went to get my PhD. And so he wrote me a letter of recommendation. And so he was like my boss and my colleague, but he was definitely a professional mentor for me. The one thing, since, there are women on this call, it's actually still, it depends where you are, but it can be a bit of a male dominated environment. It can be extremely helpful to just have like, I don't know, like, mentors who come from your community, or who you relate to, in terms like who are, for me, for example, I identify as a cis woman, and so like just having a woman who as a mentor, I've had such people as well. I've had them in graduate school as well. So yeah, the thing is, mentorship, that itself is a skill, we've realized. So people can be like not great mentors too, and the real role of the mentor is just to like support you in your own process of discovery, as opposed to like try to impose their ideas and vision on you. And so there's quite an important, shift in that. This itself is a skill. Mentoring is itself a skill. And some people are just good at it. Some people need a little extra help. But yeah, I think mentorship is really, really important, and I've certainly benefited from it.
There's a question.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm writing his name down.
Excellent.
That's his name.
Well, we are just about out of time. I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your story and your advice to the folks on the call, and to the 100 or 200 that have registered that we're going to share this with. The recordings will be provided directly to the registrants and then later shared more widely. But did you have any other final thoughts that you wanted to share with our audience?
Just that this is actually a great time to be working in conservation. It's a great time to be working in climate. It is, the biggest challenge of our time, but it is also an opportunity to work. It's the opportunity to work and do meaningful work, where your values and are aligned with what you turn up to do every single day. So we are, there's this great quote from this book by this climate psychologist, this woman named Margaret Klein Salomon. And she says, guess what? You have been chosen to, why are you born in this time? Because you are here to fight the apocalypse. This is your role. This is why you exist in this momentous moment. So that's what we're here for. We're here to fight back the apocalypse. So let's get to work.
Excellent. Again, thank you so much. And everyone, I hope you join us again tomorrow, same time. We'll be having our Climate Equity Collaborative panel. Thank you again.
Thank you, David. And thank you, everybody.